The Mountains to Sea Trail stretches nearly 1,200 miles across the great state of North Carolina, crossing mountain passes, countless rivers and streams, and weaving its way through the heart and soul of the state. Walking across North Carolina on the Mountains to Sea Trail will not only lead you to unspeakable natural beauty, but to many communities across the state that embrace the trail and celebrate those who walk its path. But the MST is more than just a path. It is a community in itself. We hike it, we bike it, we paddle it, we build it, we maintain it, we advocate for it, we love it. We are the MST. The vision for the Mountains to Sea Trail began to form and take shape over 45 years ago. And not unlike today, people back then were venturing outside to absorb more of what nature had to offer. In order to fully embrace where the Mountains to Sea Trail will take us in the future, we must first take time to know and understand how the trail was conceived, planned, and built for all of us to enjoy.
Conditions in the 1920s and 30s during the Depression, the war, that people were hungry to get outdoors, and they found healing and reconnection and recreation, if you will, in outdoor activities.
Jim Halsey, considered the key architect of the Mountains to Sea Trail, was a fresh graduate of North Carolina State University in the mid-1960s and was hired on to the state's Recreation Commission to pursue developing a statewide trail system.
It became obvious that what we need is a flagship trail, you know, a primary trail that people can relate to. The system plan was a network of trails, and it was just too overwhelming. You know, people couldn't wrap their heads around that. So the idea was, is there within this particular network a most feasible trail or route that could be pursued? And that's where the Mountains to Sea Trail concept came from. Mountains to Sea was a no-brainer. It was going to span the state from the mountains to the sea.
And you named it Mountains to Sea, right? Mountains to Sea Trail.
You know, that's the name I've used all along.
Yeah.
I don't know that I claim the authorship of that any more than anybody else.
And what about the white dot? Where did the white dot come from?
It came out of my mind, looking at all kinds of different symbols and symbology, and trying to think of something that was unique, fairly, and naive as I was at the time, should be fairly easy to put up. Looking at lots of options, it just seemed unique to me. I kind of like Circle for its implications of continuity and long-term presence and cohesiveness, I guess, of a circle. It has no corners, has no beginning, has no end.
In 1977, Howard Lee, then Secretary of the North Carolina Department of Natural Resources and Community Development, delivered a speech at the National Trail Symposium held in Lake Junaluska. It was there that he stated in his speech, "I think the time has come for us to consider the feasibility of establishing a state trail between the mountains and the seashore in North Carolina."
I was a little nervous about making that kind of commitment because I had no idea how we would implement such an idea. Jim promised me that if we could move forward, he would certainly work hard to make sure that I didn't get embarrassed and that it would happen. And he schooled me. He actually told me how we could make this happen by bringing together private lands, public lands, and especially land that was owned by the federal and state governments.
There was a lot of interest in him being the keynote speaker. He had a speechwriter, Steve Meehan, and I was the staff planner. And as I recall, there was a lot of back and forth between myself and Steve that eventually got to Howard, and you know, that's the way this thing came to pass. Now Howard was the sole individual that decided to throw that line in about a trail from the mountains to the sea.
Okay.
And we had talked about that concept, but it was his decision to bring it out at,
Awesome.
at that point in time. When we began planning the trail, for me it was principally a experiment and an exercise in geographic configuration of connections from place to place. One of the masterful, mysterious aspects of Mr. Lee's involvement was his understanding of and commitment to community. And I say that as probably the major thing that Howard has brought to the Mountains to Sea Trail concept, is the non-ending emphasis and recognition of this little path, in whatever form it takes, wherever it goes, is an obvious avenue to bring community together.
With the stage now set for success, it was time to get to work. First, putting pen to paper to carve out a line on the map that would connect the mountains of North Carolina with the Atlantic Ocean.
I think the desire to have it mimic the Appalachian Trail as a long-distance hiking trail sort of made people lose sight of the fact that the original idea was the trail system would serve all types of trail users. And as the so-called flagship trail, the Mountains to Sea Trail should involve all of those user types. And I had a matrix of paper maps in my office. As I recall, it took about 19 to 22 of those sheets to tape together, and I was blessed with an office large enough to have a wall that I could hang that thing on. And I hung those matrix maps on that wall, put some clear acetate across it, got my little grease pencils out, and started dreaming and inviting others to come in and see what the potential was.
As trail construction plans continued, another key visionary of the Mountains to Sea Trail entered the scene in the early 1980s. Am Gayheart, an Army veteran and professor at Lewisburg College, was an avid outdoorsman and had authored several books and trail guides. Alan took ownership of the trail's creation and brought many alongside him, including one of his students, Jeff Brewer, who would eventually become the first president of the Friends of the Mountains to Sea Trail Board in 1997.
So I guess it started off with a Christmas present, with the book, Am Gayheart's book. And from there, I went to Lewisburg College and met Alan, and obviously he was the professor there teaching hiking and backpacking, and obviously authored the book. And so we immediately hit it off, great friends. I always saw him as a grandfather figure. We just struck up a friendship, and he said, hey, let's go do some trail research. And so it started first with his books, Virginia, South Carolina, on spring break and fall break. And then from there, we started doing a lot of research for the MST. And I'd always heard about the MST through reading the book, but didn't know, where's this project at? I think it's on the early stages of development and stuff like that. And so from there, it just took off like a rocket ship, and it really hadn't stopped.
Alan was a passionate lover of the outdoors, an excellent amateur naturalist. He was probably the most prolific author of hiking trail guidebooks that I'm aware of.
Am Gayheart was one of the most dedicated and committed trail people I've ever known and will ever know.
I think probably one of the highest compliments you can give a person is calling them a Renaissance person. And by far, he was a Renaissance man with what he did. And so he was super type A, goal-oriented, and, I think I told you before, Alan was a fighter. And, if there was a fight, whether it was over trail routing or do we need this bridge or do we need this funding, you wanted Alan on your side. He had a way with words. He had a way with writing letters that, it was a wake-up call. And if you didn't reply to his letter that was sent to the Forest Service in a timely manner, you got another letter. But Alan knew what he wanted, and he knew what it was going to take to put the trail on the ground, and work with federal and state employees and stuff like that.
I'm convinced today that had Alan not taken that on as a personal mission in the early 1990s, that the trail would not be on the ground here today. I mean, he persevered without a lot of support, I'll put it that way. Not opposition so much as just not a lot of support.
So I'd say it got really, really busy when he came to me at Lewisburg and said, listen, here's an idea I got. I'm gonna create a nonprofit group, much like the Appalachian Trail Conservancy, to oversee the design, construction, and maintenance of the Mountain Sea Trail. And he's like, do you wanna be the first president? And I was like, well, I said, what are we talking about here? How much work are we talking about? And he jokingly laughed and said, well, I can't give you that answer. I mean, it could be an hour a week, it could be multiple hours a day, whatever, you're willing to put into it. It's like, okay. So he, does the charter, the nonprofit status, and we get a small board, and from there it was just game on.
And Alan Gayheart is the person who, in my opinion, is the second most important person in this trail configuration. Jim Halsey, in my opinion, is the #1 person, but Alan Gayheart is the #2 person because he actually saved the Mountain to Sea Trail when he created the Friends organization.
And so it was a lot of work. It was something, as soon as one work day or a board meeting got done, it was time to start planning for the next one, along with all the other little mini projects we had, going on across the state, trying to complete some of the gaps, whether it was bridges or the Bald Knob Trail construction, or how are we going to advance the trail up the Blue Ridge Parkway to Dalton Park. I mean, it was on. It was game on.
As the trail, and specifically the Friends of the Mountains to Sea Trail, grew as an organization, it became clear that the Friends were ready to have an executive director join the cause. No mere mortal would do, though. Even with the strong foundation laid by so many supporters, this new executive director would need not only a keen sense of the trail's identity, but the foresight to take the trail where no one thought possible. Kate Dixon entered the scene and started as the first executive director for the Friends of the Mountains to Sea Trail in 2008, and served in that role until her retirement in April of 2022. Kate hired the first paid employees for the Friends, managed a vast volunteer base, and set in motion the plans for the Coastal Crescent Route, a route that would take the trail through the agricultural and coastal heartland of North Carolina.
There were a number of things that had made me think about the Mountains to Sea Trail and get really interested in it. But I knew a guy named Steve Meehan, who is the man who wrote Howard Lee's speech in 1977. He was the public information officer at the time. And so I called Steve and I said, Steve, I'm really thinking I'd like to do this. What do you think? And, how should I proceed? And he called Jeff and Alan Gayheart and said, Kate Dixon's interested, and what do you think? And they said, we'd like to talk to her.
So Steve Meehan comes to me, and he did a lot of PR work for Parks and Rec. And so he called me up one day and he's like, hey, I need to talk to you. There's a lady who's interested in being your executive director. I was like, sure, let's go. So we had that conversation, and obviously it was Kate. So next it was time, I had to go to Alan and say, hey, this is the opportunity here. Let's sit down with Kate. After Kate came on board, she worked a long time with no salary. Not a lot of people know that. I think that takes a special individual that wants to do that. Then the board, went through some growing pains because you've got an executive director. So when you have that, it's time for the treasurer, which was Alan, to give the books over so she can take care of the accounting, or give it to another volunteer or to a paid staff that can do the books. And so that was really challenging. It was almost like, especially for Alan, this is my baby. Mm-hmm. I've had it for so long, and the baby's growing up, and it's time to, give some of the information and some of the workload over to somebody else, like Kate or, another person as a volunteer to handle that.
Kate is the one who put this trail and the Friends organization on her back and actually carried it. She never did this for money, obviously. Right. But she was never paid what she deserved in terms of what all she did and how hard she worked.
I knew already that working in a nonprofit with a lot of volunteers was incredibly fun and motivational to me. it seemed like a perfect fit from that perspective. And I also was really interested in the conservation aspects of it. There were so many things to focus on just to make the organization stronger that I actually, so in my time, I had thought I would probably do more land work, given that I had, come from a land conservation, land trust background. And then that didn't happen until after we hired Ben. Partly because, and I think the board was really wise, right at the very beginning, they said, we're not going to be a land trust right now. We may be a land trust later, but we're not going to be a land trust now. And I think that for this organization, that was completely right, because we had so many things to do to just, build the organization and take care of sort of the support for the trail part of it and the trail guides and all of that. And so, we would kind of attack problems as they came up. And I think I would also, we had no money, obviously. So, if the right volunteer walked in the door, you might end up working on that problem, a problem that you weren't going to work on right at the beginning, but the right volunteer comes in and you're like, okay, you can do this.
She has always seen herself not as the decider or the person who's responsible for having all the great ideas, but as an implementer, a person who hears what all of the interests and concerns are, brings them together, and then presents the picture that others are then able to sign on to and support.
And I told her this at the conference, just personally. I said, but you had a vision and you had the ability and will to persevere and work towards consensus and not be deterred by tradition or presumptions of what things had to be. You recognize the potential for the coastal crescent and that area of the state to incorporate some of the most beautiful, sensitive, rare, natural resources of the state that we have, and communities that have their own story.
The next time you find yourself on the Mountains to Sea Trail, or any trail, take a moment. Appreciate those that had the vision to create the trail that you now enjoy. Each trail has a story that contains the names of dedicated individuals with a common purpose and a common passion to build something, create something greater than the sum of its parts that will endure for generations to come.
And learn to respect the land, the people who have always been on the land, the people who have been on the land through generations under adversity of all kinds, yet it's still available in this place, this time, for you to walk on, for you to share, for you to ponder, for you to, get the good tidings of the wilderness, as Muir says. Go out there and get the good tidings.
I'm Jester.
And I'm Austin.
And we are the MST.
My name is Angel, and I am the MST.
Hey there, I'm Jennifer Farr Davis, and I am the MST. And so are you.
My name is Alice Butler. I'm the mayor of the town of Roseboro. I am the MST.
Hi, I'm Abby, and I am the MST.
And I'm Jason, and I am the MST.
Hi, I am Rowan, and I am the MST.
My name is Brent Lawrence, and I am the MST.
I'm Howard Lee, and I am the MST.
Hi, I'm Cindy, and I am the MST.
Hi, I'm Tom Dellinger, and I am the MST.
Hi, I'm Danny Bernstein from Asheville, and I am the MST.
I'm Betsy Brown. I work with Friends of the Mountains to Sea Trail. I am the MST.
I'm Jeff Brewer, and I am the MST.
My name's Dwayne Patterson. I'm Director of North Carolina State Parks, and I am the MST.